Welcome back to our channel. Found Washington quarters? It might be rare and valuable. Like and subscribe to find out which ones are worth big money. The year 1983 marked a period of shifting momentum in the United States. Ronald Reagan's economic policies were beginning to take shape, and while unemployment was gradually declining, the aftershocks of recession still echoed through many American households. Inflation hovered with an unpredictable edge, and the average citizen carried coins that seemed far removed from these national concerns. Yet, within the vast machinery of the U.S. Mint, something unusual was taking place, quietly, without announcement, and nearly invisible to the millions who would handle the product of that year's coinage. The Washington quarter, in circulation since 1932, remained largely unchanged in its outward appearance. The obverse carried the unmistakable profile of George Washington, while the reverse bore the heraldic eagle, wings outstretched, clutching arrows and olive branches. In 1983, as in many other years, these quarters were struck in Philadelphia and Denver using copper-nickel-clad planchets, reliable, affordable, and entirely utilitarian. Tens of millions were minted, tossed into registers, vending machines, and change jars with mechanical indifference. Yet among them, a few slipped through the mint's relentless precision, quietly defying everything the production process was supposed to ensure. For years, these outliers remained hidden, buried in circulation, obscured by their camouflage of familiarity. Then came Thomas, a middle-aged numismatist from Missouri with a deep appreciation for overlooked anomalies. He'd spent decades combing through boxes of loose change, not for treasure, but for patterns. He wasn't hunting silver or gold. He was drawn to errors, the subtle fingerprints of human oversight left on otherwise perfect pieces of metal. One gray afternoon, he sorted through a batch of circulated quarters pulled from a neighborhood bank. Most were scratched, dull, lifeless. But one caught his eye, not because it looked different, but because it felt different. Its edge was thinner. Its surface smoother. The rim, usually crisp and sharply defined, seemed oddly soft, almost incomplete. He weighed it. The reading was off, slightly lighter than the 5.67 gram standard for a clad quarter. His curiosity deepened. Turning the coin under a magnifying lamp, he noticed faint but unmistakable indicators. The reverse struck slightly off-center. The obverse details were muddled, as though the die had not fully met the planchet. Yet, these weren't mere strike errors. Something deeper was wrong. It felt like the coin itself wasn't made of the right material. It lacked the usual sandwich coloring, the exposed copper core was missing from its edge. The entire rim glinted with a uniform silvery hue. It was unmistakably off. Thomas, careful not to alert casual eyes, contacted a trusted grading service. He sent the coin with a vague note and no return name. Weeks passed with silence until the certification returned. What he had was an ultra-rare 1983 quarter struck on a dime planchet. A Roosevelt dime planchet. Smaller in diameter. Lighter in weight. And never meant for quarter dies. The implication staggered him. In 1983, the U.S. Mint had not reported any official errors of this kind. This wasn't a mint set coin. These were the years before the reintroduction of proof sets for collectors. Any coin made for circulation that slipped through with this kind of misalignment was the result of a highly specific, nearly impossible chain of mistakes. A dime blank, somehow mixed into quarter planchet batches, had been pressed under intense pressure by quarter dies, leaving behind a distorted but functional coin that now held a place in the numismatic record for all the wrong reasons. The rarity lay not only in the error but in the context. In 1982 and 1983, the Mint had suspended the production of traditional uncirculated mint sets due to budget concerns. That meant few pristine examples of coins from those years had ever entered collectors' hands directly from the mint. Most 1983 quarters came from circulation, worn and diminished. Finding one in mint state was hard enough. Finding one struck on the wrong planchet, an error known as a wrong stock strike, was unheard of. Collectors took notice. Word spread in hushed conversations at coin shows and online forums. What had started as a curiosity became a benchmark. Was this an isolated incident? How many more could there be? Theories formed. Some speculated that during a hurried production cycle at the Philadelphia Mint, a bin of dime blanks had been misrouted. Others believed it was possible that leftover planchets from a test batch had been improperly purged and mixed in with quarters. Regardless of the cause, the outcome was now irrefutable. At least one 1983 quarter had escaped on a dime planchet, and it was real. Auction houses approached Thomas discreetly. The coin went up for private appraisal and stunned the room. The estimate dwarfed anything he had anticipated. It wasn't just a flawed coin, it was a historical anomaly, magnified by the scarcity of quality 1983 quarters to begin with. Early offers flirted with 5 figures. But Thomas refused to part with it. He knew its worth would rise, not just in value but in meaning. Then, in an unexpected twist, another surfaced. A Florida collector, flipping through rolls purchased from a flea market, found what appeared to be a poorly struck quarter with an oddly small diameter. It too was lighter than standard. It too bore the marks of being struck on a dime planchet. And once again, it came from 1983. This time, the die alignment was slightly more centered, giving clearer detail to the eagle's wings and Washington's profile, though still constrained by the smaller blank. Now there were 2. The market responded with electric anticipation. If 2 existed, there could be more, but how many? The answer appeared to be very few. No flood emerged. No wave of discoveries followed. As of today, fewer than 5 of these off-metal 1983 quarters have been confirmed and authenticated. Each one bears unique distortions, but they all share the same haunting origin: coins never meant to exist, born of a mechanical oversight in a year with notoriously limited collector availability. Their value climbed steadily. In 2010, one of the known examples traded hands privately for $17,000. By 2016, that figure had doubled. The market, once skeptical, now recognized their significance. By 2023, a mint state example sold through a high-profile auction house for over $82,000, sparking a renewed interest in overlooked rolls and change drawers across the country. And yet, the full story remains incomplete. There are unanswered questions: how many more were struck, how many were caught and destroyed, and whether any remain in the wild, tucked into boxes of forgotten change, their true identity masked by their size and shimmer. Even now, collectors sift through coins not just to find treasure, but to be part of a narrative still unfolding. The 1983 quarter on a dime planchet now sits at the intersection of curiosity and legacy. It is not merely an error, it's a snapshot of a moment when a small, unintended detail escaped the system and became a coveted artifact. It challenges assumptions about what belongs, what endures, and what waits quietly to be discovered by those paying close attention. Today, its value depends on condition and clarity of strike, but experts estimate its range to fall between $48,000 and $110,000. For a coin born from silence and oversight, it now speaks louder than any quarter from its era, carrying not just a face and a date, but a mystery that continues to unfold with every new set of eyes that finds it. 1994 marked a period of quiet confidence in the United States. Economic reforms had begun to yield results, and the world was shifting gently toward the digital age. Yet amid all the change, one thing remained remarkably consistent: the production of America's everyday coins. The Washington quarter, unchanged since the mid-1930s, continued to anchor daily transactions. With its familiar obverse of George Washington and the timeless eagle on the reverse, the quarter was minted in the hundreds of millions that year, pouring out of the Philadelphia and Denver mints with machine-like uniformity and flawless precision. In such a massive and predictable production environment, mistakes weren't just rare, they were considered nearly impossible. State-of-the-art machinery scanned, aligned, and struck every coin with almost unerring accuracy. Each planchet was weighed and measured to exact standards. Each die was calibrated to leave a perfect impression. But then, despite all that precision, something happened deep within the hum of minting lines, a deviation so subtle, so quiet, it passed unnoticed through every layer of control. Far from the noise of minting facilities and coin sorting machines, a retired teacher named Marcus in Vermont sat at his kitchen table, a box of loose change beside him. Coin collecting had always been a personal escape, never about profit, but about curiosity. He had a habit of buying rolls of coins from the bank, scanning them for anything unusual. He didn't expect much from quarters minted in the 1990s. They were too modern, too consistent. Until he opened that box that he noticed it almost immediately, not because of color or wear, but because of balance. The coin didn't feel right in his palm. When he dropped it onto the counter with a handful of others, it sounded off, higher pitched, sharper. Something told Marcus to take a closer look. Under magnification, the design appeared slightly off-center. The rim was too tight around the letters. The eagle's wings on the reverse seemed more compressed, even though the rest of the details were clear and unblemished. Out came the digital scale. The weight landed at just under 5.1 grams. A genuine 1994 quarter should weigh closer to 5.67 grams. A difference that significant couldn't be brushed off as wear. Marcus examined it further. The edges were properly reeded, the strike was strong, but it was clear now, this was no ordinary coin. What he held was a 1994 Washington quarter struck on a foreign planchet. A planchet not intended for quarter production, likely from a different minting contract or a leftover from a non-US issue. The coin was slightly smaller, slightly thinner, yet perfectly struck with US quarter dies. How such a planchet ended up on the quarter press in a year with no known planchet transitions was a mystery. But the error was real. Marcus sent the coin to a reputable grading agency. He waited with cautious excitement. The confirmation came back with a slab, clearly marked, 1994 quarter, struck on foreign planchet, 58 Australian dollars. The moment was surreal. A mistake hidden in a sea of millions had emerged in his own home, undetected for decades. It had traveled through countless hands, cash registers, and pockets before finding someone who could recognize its true nature. The story spread quietly at first, but word in collector circles moves fast. Coin forums lit up with speculation. How many of these errors could be out there? Was this a one-off mistake, or had a handful managed to escape unnoticed? Soon, other examples came to light. A woman in Ohio found one in a jar her grandfather had collected from toll booths during the 1990s. A dealer in Nevada discovered another while reviewing bulk coinage for silver content. Each coin showed the same symptoms: underweight, slightly reduced diameter, tightly squeezed design. The pattern was undeniable. What made the 1994 quarter error so compelling wasn't just the rarity. It was the lack of context. The U.S. Mint had no record of quarter production involving foreign planchets that year. There were no design changes or compositional shifts underway. No known contracts aligned with the planchet dimensions. The errors existed in a vacuum, unexplained, elusive, and completely out of sync with the surrounding coinage history. Collectors were drawn in. These weren't coins altered by damage or environmental exposure. They weren't struck by worn dies or slightly off-centered machinery. They were, instead, fundamentally wrong in their metal composition, revealing a breakdown in the most basic step of the minting process, the planchet feed. Prices began to climb, cautiously at first. A confirmed specimen in fine condition sold for $17,000 in 2012. A better preserved example fetched $31,000 at an East Coast auction 2 years later. The market shifted quickly after that. With only a handful authenticated examples, demand exceeded supply almost immediately. The coin Marcus found eventually entered the spotlight. Its sharp strike and clear details made it one of the finest known examples. Private offers began to arrive, some from overseas collectors fascinated with U.S. minting history. When he finally accepted a sale in 2019, the amount reportedly crossed $80,000. Interest in modern mint errors was already growing, and these 1994 quarter anomalies added serious fuel to that fire. They were perfect contradictions, common dates with uncommon flaws, minted in a time of control but defined by unpredictability. And with the state quarter program launching the very next year, they stood as the last anomaly of an era soon to be transformed. Today, these 1994 foreign planchet error quarters remain among the rarest and most desired modern U.S. mint errors. They blur the lines between accident and enigma, between mechanical oversight and historical artifact. For collectors and historians alike, they remind us that even in systems designed for perfection, randomness still finds its way in. Only a few confirmed examples are known, and each has become a centerpiece in advanced error collections. The mystery remains unsolved. How these planchets entered the U.S. minting process in a stable production year is still unknown. What is known is their value. Depending on condition, documentation, and clarity of error, these 1994 $quarter coins are now valued between $42,000 and $102,000. A quiet error born from a system designed to eliminate surprises, now standing as one of the most captivating modern rarities in American numismatics. 2004 brought Florida into the national spotlight once again, not for hurricanes or headlines, but for something far quieter and far more enduring. The U.S. Mint State Quarters program was in its 6th year, and Florida was the 27th state honored in the celebrated series. The design was approved, the dies were ready, and the presses began rolling at the Philadelphia and Denver mints with the same high-speed precision as always. George Washington's familiar profile remained on the obverse, but the reverse bore a striking tribute: a Spanish galleon under full sail, a space shuttle arching toward the stars, and the outline of the state connecting history and progress. It was a statement of legacy and future ambition, wrapped neatly into a 24.26 mm coin. Millions upon millions were struck, over 480 million in total. These quarters passed through hands across the country, used in vending machines, tucked into collections, forgotten in drawers. Their purpose was both commemorative and practical. But in the shadows of that massive production run, something quietly slipped through the mint's defenses. A mistake. One that remained hidden in plain sight. In southern Georgia, just across the border from Jacksonville, a young collector named Elena was sorting through a mix of recently withdrawn quarters. She was assembling state sets for local schoolchildren, hoping to spark their interest in history and geography. The Florida quarters were particularly eye-catching, but one caught her attention not for its design, but for its strange, almost unnatural luster. The coin was noticeably thinner. It had an odd resonance when dropped, a higher ring that didn't match the rest. She examined it under light and saw something else. The edges were unusually smooth, and the design was subtly distorted. Florida and the state outline were cramped toward the rim. The shuttle's plume looked faint. On the obverse, Washington's head was pressed so tightly to the edge that the letters of Liberty were nearly clipped. Her instincts, long sharpened through patient study, told her this wasn't a typical weak strike. It was something more. A quick scale reading confirmed the anomaly. The coin weighed only 4.8 grams, far below the standard 5.67. Elena's heart raced. She checked the dimensions. Slightly smaller diameter. Same clad surface, but clearly struck on a planchet that didn't belong to a quarter. She'd heard of such errors, coins struck on foreign blanks or planchets meant for other denominations, but had never seen one firsthand. She mailed it off for grading, heart pounding with anticipation. Weeks later, the coin returned sealed in a plastic slab. The label confirmed her hopes: 2004 Florida quarter, struck on wrong planchet, AU details. A certified error, verified and encapsulated. She was holding a rare slip of history. The fact that it belonged to the state quarter era, a period scrutinized by millions of hobbyists, only deepened the mystery. How had such a significant error gone unnoticed? Collectors were intrigued. Error coins from the state quarter series weren't unheard of, but most involved off-center strikes or cladding flaws. A wrong planchet error, especially one involving a state as widely distributed as Florida, was extraordinary. Forums buzzed with speculation. Some theorized it was struck on a planchet meant for a 5-cent coin from another country. Others guessed it may have been a test blank that accidentally remained in the system when production switched to the Florida design. No official explanation emerged, and the mint never issued any public acknowledgement. Then more surfaced. A collector in Illinois uncovered another, bearing the same tight strike, lightweight, and compressed details. Later that year, a third turned up at a coin show in Albuquerque. The consensus among experts grew: these weren't post-mint alterations or damage. They were genuine wrong planchet strikes, coins minted in error during the height of public attention on the series. That irony didn't go unnoticed. During one of the most heavily monitored periods in U.S. coin production history, errors of this magnitude should have been impossible. The mints had poured resources into quality assurance, anticipating mass interest. Yet the machinery had faltered. Or perhaps, more accurately, human error had intervened, and a handful of foreign or off-metal blanks had slipped through unnoticed. The story grew legs. Auction houses took notice. The first confirmed Florida wrong planchet error coin sold quietly for $18,000 in 2011. By 2015, another in near-mint condition brought in $33,000. Each example added fuel to the narrative. These coins weren't just mistakes. They were whispers of chaos within a system built for order. Elena never sold her coin. It remained the centerpiece of her collection, a reminder of the day when careful attention and a curious mind uncovered what hundreds of machines and experts had missed. But others did sell, and each time a new example appeared, it pushed the ceiling higher. Private sales began to rival auction listings, and soon the Florida State Quarter error was one of the most desirable among modern collectors. The demand wasn't just about rarity. It was about the convergence of moments. A popular series. A historically rich design. An error that defied oversight. All wrapped in the image of a state defined by exploration, from conquistadors and space shuttles to collectors diving into unknown numismatic depths. Today, fewer than 10 certified examples are known, and each carries the hallmarks of the mistake: underweight, slightly undersized, cleanly struck but visibly constrained. The coin's conditions vary. Some show full luster and minimal wear, others are slightly circulated, but the error remains undeniable. The mint, as expected, has remained silent. No press release. No records. No internal audit disclosures. The 2004 Florida wrong planchet errors remain unacknowledged, as if the system prefers to pretend they never happened. But collectors know better. They've seen the anomalies, held them in their hands, measured the details the machines couldn't hide. In the end, these Florida State Quarter errors stand as both relic and rebellion. Relics of a program designed to educate and celebrate the states, and rebellions against the mechanical certainty the mint depends upon. They are reminders that even in modern production, perfection is a myth, and that sometimes, the most remarkable coins are born from the smallest missteps. Now, with increasing demand and a market hungry for true modern errors, the 2004 Florida Quarter struck on a wrong planchet commands serious attention. Depending on condition, clarity, and provenance, these elusive pieces are valued today between $34,000 and $85,000. Not bad for a coin intended to represent history, and instead, became a part of it in a way no one expected.